Hello, friends. We're back at the Big Kids table.
Yeah!
The two children on your screen go by the name Jessie and Emerson.
Woo!
All right, we welcome you to our nightly show. It is called The Sweat.
No adults, no rules. Tons to get to and not a lot of time. A fantasy
Coffee's
preview
kicking in.
of the Redskins season, some PGA Price Check ahead of the British Open, and a jam-packed 15-game baseball slate. Oh!
I like the idea of starting with baseball, young ladies.
Okay.
So allow me to introduce our panel tonight as my computer starts to go crazy.
Why we
I'm
should
watching
have
the
adults,
show.
but we
All right,
don't
yes, we
have
really
it.
should. DK Live, Steve Buchanan, Matt LaMarca of the Action Network, Mr. Jonah Carey of The Athletic, and MLB Pickoff is where it's at, yo. So which side of the following bets would you fall on?
Starting with the Red Sox, who traded for Andrew Cashner just a few days ago. He starts tonight against the Blue Jays. And Boston's a pretty big favorite in this one at minus 190 odds. Or you could go with the road team and get plus 165 for Toronto. Which team do you feel better about in this one here, Jonah?
I'm going to take the Sox. They're favorites just because they're a better team to start off with. But it's Jacob Waguespack going in this game. Not only is his name difficult to say, but he's got a 5.30 ERA in minors. No reason to believe he's going to fare any better against a potent Red Sox lineup. And as for Cashner, he's getting more support for the Reds with the Red Sox than he is with the Orioles. Red Sox about a middle-of-the-pack defense when you look at it by defensive runs saved, whereas the Orioles were the second worst team in the American League by defensive runs saved at a minus 63. So Cashner likely to get more support when it comes to runs and more support when it comes to defense. Yes, the Red Sox are giving up some odds here, but I like them to win.
Yeah, Steve, Cashner's final start in Baltimore came against Toronto, actually, last Saturday, ahead of the All-Star break there, and he limited the Blue Jays to 1 run off 3 hits over 7 innings.
He looks happy.
I mean, I hate this trade. I was never happy about this trade, and now my hometown team's got Andrew freaking Cashner in a Red Sox jersey. Like, you know, cue the duck boats. Here comes the championship, right?
He was so good on the Orioles. Come on.
I don't care. He sucks, dude. Anyways, let's talk about, I can't envision myself ever throwing money down on a 190 money line that involves Andrew Cashner and the Red Sox bullpen. The Toronto odds here, plus 165, are so much more enticing. I mean, look at the Red Sox. They were up huge last night. You know, they ended up winning that game 10-8, but that game was so much closer than it was because once that bullpen comes in, anything is on the table at this point. So Red Sox lost another arm. They just sent Ryan Brazier down, who was their saves leader up to this point. So that bullpen is just such a tragedy right now that, 190 for a Boston team with that bullpen and, whatever we're going to get out of Andrew Cashner, don't feel good about it. So I'll definitely take the Blue Jays at plus 165.
Matt, we got Jonah going with the Red Sox, Steve going with the Blue Jays. Who do you like?
Yeah, I can't believe I'm going to do it, but I'm going to side with Mr. Buchanan here.
Oh, man.
I just can't back Andrew Cashner as a minus 190 favorite on sheer principle. I'm with Steve. I have no idea why the Red Sox traded for him. Yes, his ERA this season has been solid, but he's also been one of the luckiest pitchers in baseball. He's got a 256 batting average on balls in play this year, despite having the 15th worst mark in terms of soft contact generated. So guys are hitting the ball hard against him. It's just not finding grass. And that's a bad sign for him moving forward. If you look at his xFIP, it's 4.90. It's more than a full run higher than his ERA. You can't back a pitcher like that at minus 190. Like, I get that the Blue Jays are a bad team, but we have a trend at Action Network. If you look at divisional underdogs in games with totals of at least 9, they're historically a profitable bet. So for me, it's Blue Jays or nothing here.
All right, Steve, I'm going to start with you here because you wrote about this game on the DK playbook here. The Giants and Rockies delivering 2 different games in their doubleheader on Monday. So you had one game with 21 combined runs. 19 of them were in San Francisco. Another with just 3 total runs. The over-under for tonight is 14.5. So what do you like more here, the over or the under? I believe you wrote up it's a game that, you should target.
So here's the thing. I don't mind targeting this game because you got 2 bad pitchers on the mound, but I'm taking the under in this one. 14.5 runs is just so many runs to come up with. I already see LaMarca making some stupid gesture. Okay, whatever, LaMarca. That is just so. Get that stupid face off there. Let me talk. 14 and a half runs is just so many runs to come by. And look, I know that the Giants just scored 19 in that first game. It's not like they're this great offense. And then the Rockies offense hasn't really looked that good either. And give him credit. Drew Pomeranz, who I'm always on board to talk trash about him, been pitching pretty well. So there's just so many factors here that I feel like this game can go under. Could they get in the double digits? Absolutely. I have no problem saying this could be a 10 or 11 run game, but 14 and a half runs. We're banking on 15 runs here. It just feels like a lot for me, so I'm going to take the under here. Let's hear Matt and all this brilliance. Let's see what trend the Action Network has. On July 15th, when the sun is in this position, this is what happens. Go ahead.
Matt, you and your stupid face have the floor.
Yeah, this total would have to be like closer to 18 for me to consider taking the under. For starters, if you look at overs of at least 13 runs, they are historically 19, 10, and 3 since 2005, 14, 8, and 3 in quarters. So not a big sample size, but definitely profitable to take the over here. And this may be the worst pitching matchup we've seen in baseball all season. Peter Lambert, 9.17 ERA at home this season. And Drew Pomeranz, Steve says he's been pretty good, but it's easy to pitch in San Francisco. You look at what he's done when he's on the road, 9.72 ERA. So two guys who are on the worst side of their ERA splits here. I'm expecting just a boatload of runs.
Okay, Jonah, that said, sounds like it's the worst pitching matchup that we have on the docket here. They're at Coors Field. What are the chances you're going with the over?
I am taking the over. I'm going to side with Matt here. If you look at it, let's take the trends. 11 of the last 15 games against Coors Field. It does seem like a lot. It's a lot. In my mind, I agree with Steve that it seems like a lot. But 11 of the last 15 have gone over 14 and a half. Some of them very comfortably. And if you look at it, we have to account for weather here, too. I'm a former Denver resident. I know that when the summertime happens, it is hot and dry air. League-wide, we've seen offensives go up as the summer has gone on, and we've seen it especially at Coors. It's 95 degrees in Denver today, friends. It's going to be hot. The ball is going to fly, and I expect 15 to be a very reachable number here in this game.
And Steve, by the way, your former Red Sox, member of the Red Sox, Pablo Sandoval, I don't know if you saw today, he won San Francisco's Heart and Hustle Award.
Yeah, I mean, that just says everything about the state of that team.
I knew you wouldn't have much on that.
Hustle. Okay, the Braves are riding a 5-game win streak, and you can get plus money on them against Milwaukee. So what do you like more, Atlanta at plus 155 or Milwaukee at minus 177, Matt?
I'm going to give the Brewers a slight lean here. Braves sending Bryce Wilson to the mound hasn't been good this year. Struggled in particular against left-handed bats. 429 WOBA allowed, 2 home runs over just 6.2 innings. And if you look at the Brewers lineup, they are primarily made up of lefty bats. You got Christian Yelich, Yasmani Grandal, Mike Moustakas, Eric Thames. Those are all guys that I think could do some damage against Wilson in this matchup. The Brewers have Brandon Woodruff on the mound. He's been solid this year. I'll back the Brewers here as a fave.
Jonah, who do you like in this one?
I'm going to take the Braves, and I do agree with Matt that there are a lot of left-handed bats in that lineup, but it doesn't necessarily show up in the splits. If you look at it, the Braves have been 4% better than league average based on WRC Plus this season against right-handers, and the Brewers have been 2% worse. That's including Christian Yelich, who's a god. So the numbers aren't really there necessarily for them. The odds are favorable. Wilson versus Woodruff certainly favors the Brewers, but those are pretty sweet odds. So I'll take a flyer on this one. I like those underdog odds, considering that the Braves are a better team overall, and they're a better team against right-handed pitching.
Yeah, Steve, and Freddie Freeman has just been on fire recently.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Brewers on this one, too. I mean, you look at Woodruff and what he's done all season long. He's just been consistent. He goes deep into games, gets a good amount of strikeouts. I mean, I think it was over his last 6 starts, he's gone at least 6 innings in those games and struck out 6. I mean, you don't really get that type of consistency. The Braves are a good team. There's no doubt about that. But, kind of like what Matt was saying, too, this is just a lefty-loaded Brewers lineup. And if Woodruff is going deep in the game, they don't have to use their bullpen much either. So I just like the Brewers' chances in this one a little bit better. Again, 177, kind of steep for money line odds, but I would much rather take that than the 155 for the Braves because I just see the scenario where Woodruff goes 7 strong innings in this game and then the bullpen just closes it out.
All right, Jonah, tonight CC Sabathia will face one of the most strikeout-prone teams in Tampa Bay. I mean, DK Sportsbook has his over-under for Case set at 4.5 here, so which way you leaning?
Over. 6 of his last 7 starts, he's gone over 4.5. And 2 of those, in fact, 2 of his last 3 came against the Rays. In one of those games against the Rays, 5 strikeouts, and in the other one against the Rays, 7 strikeouts. I think the Rays' best chance here to avoid striking out 5 times or more is to beat him around early, and that's possible. They have a very good offense. But as long as Sabathia can stay in the game, I expect he'll get there. The recent trend suggests that he will get the over, so I'll pop the over here.
All right, yeah, and Steve, the Rays are just a little above average in terms of strikeout rate, 22.6%.
I don't know if I'm missing something here with this total, but right when I saw it was 4.5, it just way too low for me. You know, the Rays are one of the highest strikeout-prone teams against lefties in the entire league. And look, Sabathia really hasn't been that bad, at least when it comes to strikeouts. I mean, he's striking out less than a batter an inning, but he's right there when it comes to that K9 percentage on the season. So I think this is a good spot for Sabathia to get at least 5 strikeouts. It would surprise me if he didn't. I mean, again, I don't know if I'm missing something here with this total, but unless he goes out and gets absolutely crushed in the first or second inning, I don't see a scenario where he doesn't go out, goes 5-6 innings, and doesn't get at least 5 strikeouts in this game. So I like this bet for the over a lot. It's actually one of my favorite bets in the entire slate.
Matty, they are at home, the Yankees. He has recorded at least 5 strikeouts in 5 of 7 on his home turf.
Yeah, I like the over as well. Like Jonah said, the only way that he doesn't get there is if Travis d'Arnaud continues to homer every time he comes to the plate and knocks him out around the 4th or 5th inning or so. But yeah, I expect close to a strikeout per inning. He went 7 innings in his last start against the Rays. I'm with these guys. It's an easy over.
Okay, clean sweep.
Clean sweep there. There are 5 players in the White Sox-Royals game with a hit total set at 1.5 tonight by DK Sportsbook. So which one has the best shot at delivering the over here, Steven?
I'm going to go with Moncada on this one. I like where he is. Obviously, the switch hitting thing is definitely in his favor in this spot. And, Glenn Sparkman has just been atrocious. I mean, there's nothing good to say about him. So I like Moncada in this spot. I mean, he's somebody that can get on base and all that. So, some of these other guys are power hitters. Their splits aren't as good against guys like Sparkman, but I think Moncada's in a really good spot in this game.
Moncada plus 140 for the over. Who are you going with here, Matt?
Yeah, I don't like how much I'm agreeing with Steve on this segment.
This is frightening.
It's Moncada
but
for
Mercury
me, too.
is in retrograde.
Oh, yeah. Wait, Mercury is in
important to know that.
retrograde. Mercury is in retrograde.
That's what her mom says.
Mercury's in retrograde, so if I'm a toxic person today, it's because of that.
To go with everything Steve said, he's batting higher up in the lineup than basically everybody else on this list. He's going to be batting second. That gives him more opportunity for 5+ at bats in this game. And another underrated thing in these hit bets is that Moncada just does not walk. He has a 7.6% walk rate. So he's not going to be getting on base that way. He's basically going to have to do it with his bat. 316 average against right-handed pitchers this season. And Glenn Sparkman stinks against left-handers. So I think Moncada's the play.
Jonah, what are the chances it's a clean sweep here?
Negative. I do like Moncada, but I like Adalberto Mondesi just a little bit more. You talk about guys who don't walk. This guy has never met a walk in his entire life. He's a stolen base champ who refuses to walk, which is kind of frustrating if you're a fantasy owner. But it's good news if you're looking for just hits here. And that's the fattest odds of anybody on the list. You're getting much better odds for Mondesi than you are for Moncada. So I do think in general you want to fade Sparkman, who's got a 381 WOBA against lefties. I'm on board with Moncada. I'm on board with other guys in general. I'd stack left-handed hitters. It's just that Mondesi's odds are so favorable that he's the flyer for me in this one.
All right, you guys take a breather, rest up, recharge, because Hot or Not is coming up right after we hit on the British Open, starting right now with Pat Mayo.
Scott, Kuchar, Hideki, and Stenson, all going to be probably anywhere from 15 to 22% owned apiece, depending on how that ends up shaking out, Ben. Do you have a preference for any one of these guys? Because I really like Stenson. I really like Scott. I really like Kuchar. I can probably get myself away from Hideki here. But how do I navigate this much chalk that I know that I'm going to have lineups that have 2 of these guys in them? And I know almost every other person is going to do that too. Do I have to get myself away from that, pick a spot down at the bottom where I know no one else is going to make my lineups unique? Or I'm very confused by this range because I want to play these guys.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's one of those things, and we mention this basically on every major show because it's really important. You don't need to be unique on all six. You need to be unique within, the totality of the lineup. So you can play two of these chalky guys together, no problem. You just really want to make sure that you do something different with the other four spots. For me, Stenson would be first, but, I know we'll talk about him. But honestly, if I had to rank this little range, first for me would be Jason Day.
So Jason Day is actually coming in, like I mentioned, at sub 10% ownership right now. And it's the first time in like over 14 months he's had 3 consecutive tournaments where he's both gained off the tee in strokes gained and gained on approach. He was terrible at the 3M because the dude couldn't putt, which is super atypical of Jason Day. So you think this is a really nice buy low spot?
Absolutely. I love it. And you just kind of said it. Jason Day historically is a phenomenal putter. Everything that I worry about with him, he's been doing really well. So if the best part of his game kind of regresses positively, comes to the Open with less buzz than he would if he would have putted normal and had a better result.
I'm looking at it right now. The past decade, Jason Day has not missed the cut at the Open. No super duper high finishes outside of the time that he just missed the playoff at St. Andrew, but consistently inside the top 25. You get a hot putting week from him, and all of a sudden, hey, there's Jason Day at the top of the leaderboard. Tambo, what do you make of this range? Like, do you have a preference? And is Jason Day? I know if you're going with Spieth, then you probably don't need Jason Day, or maybe you like him more than Adam Scott. I don't know. What are you seeing here?
I like Adam Scott. I do still like Day, though. To Ben's point, what you talked about, 8 for 8 made cuts at the Open. Stevie Williams on the bag, a little bit of extra there. You want to talk about Ricky Elliott with Brooks? I think Stevie Williams still provides Jason Day with some good leverage there. Also, his greens and regulation the last 2 times out is like 80% or something. So, he's solid right now. It's just his around the green and putter, which we all know he's one of the best, if not the best in the world at. So, love Jason Day. The one for me, and I know you guys are saying Stenson's your favorite. One of my favorite pivots in this range is actually going to Paul Casey, who nobody seems to be talking about, over Henrik Stenson, who looks like he's going to be one of the higher owned in this range, if not the highest. Henrik Stenson has been on fire coming in with approach, but he's I think his best finish on the year is 8th at the RBC Canadian Open versus Casey's 1, come 2nd, come 3rd. I think he's 9 in a row. Gained on approach, good with the putter, always been a guy that we've liked in majors. I'm not sure why there's no love for Casey and all the love for Stenson. Stenson, if anything, could sort of be priced up versus Matsuyama, who was just 11.1K a couple weeks ago and is now down to 8,500, almost the average price on DraftKings.
Well, I think when you look at Stenson, you see he has 3 consecutive top 10s. He has that 8th that you mentioned. He had a 9th at the U.S. Open. Then he had a 4th last week at the Scottish. And primarily, his problem all season has been putting. The ball striking has been super elite. The guy just can't drain a 5-foot putt. We saw echoes of that last week at the Scottish, but it was a little bit better, and the ball striking was still absolutely on point.
All right, we'll keep the British vibes cooking right now with DK Live's Jeff Ulrich rolling solo today because Reed is busy being the world's 2nd best dog dad. I wonder who wrote that script.
A distant second after yours truly. Thank you for writing that. Jeffrey, let's play some PGA Price Check, starting with Tommy Fleetwood, who's winless this year, but also hasn't missed a single cut. I feel like we say to ourselves, man, it's easy to see Fleetwood winning here multiple times every major season. So how much you like his DK price of 9,700?
Yeah, I mean, I like it from the perspective of he's actually probably a little bit overpriced this week. And he's overpriced in comparison to guys like Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, players who've just had better seasons than him or are just better players. He really shouldn't be 9,700, but the fact that he is 9,700, it's going to keep his ownership down in these big GPPs. And we've seen what Tommy Fleetwood can do in these major championships. He's put together several big rounds in the U.S. Open, solo 2nd place. He's won a lot of fantasy players a lot of money who have played him in these major championships. I don't really see a reason why you necessarily have to just cross him off your list. Like you said, he's been very consistent this year. He's kind of coming in under the radar, which is nice because a couple of years ago, he's playing at his home course, and everyone kind of picked him to win at his home course. Then he finished 60th or something. So I think he's a really interesting fantasy play. He's not my pick to win or anything, but from a pure ownership perspective, in this price range, in the 9K range, he's going to be low owned. And that's really what you want when you get an elite player like Tommy Fleetwood in a major championship at 5% ownership. I think his price is going to make him a really interesting target.
Nice.
All right, well, Bryson DeChambeau is coming off back-to-back top 10 performances, so is he priced right at 9,200?
It's a really similar story with Bryson. I think he's priced more correctly than Tommy Fleetwood. He's maybe a little bit overpriced, though, and I still think that's going to keep his ownership really low. Justin Thomas is below him. He's 9,100. Patrick Cantlay, already mentioned, is 9,000. Even Adam Scott at 8,800. I just think most people are going to choose to play those three players over Bryson DeChambeau. I think it's actually a mistake. Look what we've seen since Bryson, since the U.S. Open. He went through that bad stretch of golf where he missed a bunch of cuts. He couldn't ball strike. Everything was bad. His geometry set was off, whatever. And then he made the cut at the U.S. Open, put together a really solid top 10 at the Travelers, and he almost won in Minnesota with a freaking eagle on the last hole. Like, you can't ask for much more momentum than that. He's in Ireland. He's in a good mood, good mindset, it looks like. I really like him this week. I think 9,200, you're really not paying much more to roster him at lower ownership than a guy like Cantlay. I'm all over this. I really like Bryson this week.
All right, I feel like the British just has a way of like unearthing whatever magic that Jordan Spieth has like buried inside him. So what are your thoughts on his $8,900 price tag?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just come out here and just say you should just not play him, but you're actually correct. I mean, this is a lot of people like to talk about Jordan Spieth and the Masters, but this is basically Jordan Spieth's best event. I mean, you don't see players come in and like make the cut every year in their first 6 years in their event and get a win. He just sets up really well for Open Championship golf. Now, this year's a bit of a misnomer. This is easily the worst form he's ever come in. He's still sitting around 150th in strokes gained tee degree on the PGA. So it's not just poor form, it's really bad form. It's form that you would expect from like a guy basically struggling to keep his card on the PGA Tour. His putter has helped him at times, but I get the idea that he's going to be 5% owned or something, but I'm still not going to go there. I just feel like there's too many other solid players in this range. I think if you're going to take a shot with someone, go with one of the two names we just mentioned. Go with Bryson or Fleetwood. Those guys are at least making cuts. They seem like they're really close to something. I just don't think Jordan Spieth is close enough for me to warrant saying he's a good low-owned play, because I just don't think he is, regardless of his Open Championship form. So
I was going to say, I think even Reed earlier today when he was in the office liked Adam Scott a little more, and he's $100 less, in that same price range.
Adam Scott's going to be a little bit popular, but he's not going to be that popular. And Adam Scott he's top 10ing like every major, so it's hard to argue. That's what I mean. It's really hard to take Spieth over Scott.
Well, Phil Mickelson said he fasted for nearly a week to prepare for this event.
This is insane.
Losing 15 pounds after consuming just water and coffee for 6 days.
Okay. Noted. I'll keep that
What
diet
is
in
with this,
mind.
honestly, like, guys, what is with this fasting thing? Like, what?
Like,
Is this
listen.
Would you
North
do
America,
it?
we're so bored, we just like keep food from ourselves?
No,
Like,
Jeff. What it
He's different.
is millennials don't like eating breakfast, so we turned it into intermittent fasting. It was a very creative ploy.
So he's
but
doing
now,
like it's a millennial
Phil doesn't
thing.
understand the millennial way of life, so he was like, oh, you just drink water and coffee for 6 days. So now he's probably on the verge of death. So does a leaner lefty tickle your fancy at 7,500? I think he might just pass out on the course.
Seriously.
I have zero interest in Phil Mickelson. I don't even care about the fasting. He's just not there. He admitted it. He admitted it in his press conference this week. They asked him, what do you think your chances of ever winning? He said, I'm not really here to win. I'm just here to enjoy it. That was basically his exact answer. So I don't know how you could possibly go with a player like that, because you're basically just denying yourself the upside that this player is possibly going to have a chance of getting in contention, especially in a field this deep with other players in the 7,500 range who actually might have a chance and are in good enough form to get in contention. So I love Phil. He's hilarious. The fasting thing is actually kind of funny. It's probably good for his health. I mean, good for him if he need to lose weight or whatever. But like for an Open Championship play, you got to just fade him this week, I think. Just pretend he doesn't exist. Have fun if he makes the cut or something. But no, not for DFS.
There's no way in hell water and coffee only for 6 days is
Yeah,
good
he's
for you.
hallucinating.
I'm sorry.
He's
It's
just
no
straight
way.
up seeing things. Yeah.
Jeff, thank you for your service. I know we're going to talk a lot with you, at least tomorrow, about the British Open, and coming up in this show actually as well. Matt LaMarca and Steve Buchanan, you're going to join them too for a Redskins preview right after this healthy dose of the Tour Junkies.
I do want to talk to you about Rory, because you mentioned that you were going to play Rory on the podcast. Now, obviously, we all know that Rory is the favorite. We know that he's from Northern Ireland. I think we've heard that 100 times. I think we know that he's got the course record at a 61. I think we know that his open history is pretty solid. But tell me why you're willing to play Rory at $11,600 in this field on DraftKings. That's what I need to know. That's what you got to convince me of.
I don't know why you wouldn't play him. I mean, he's got a fantastic track record here. You look at his last 4 times playing, because he missed it in 2015, which was when he was defending, because he had that stupid soccer injury. So he won in 14, tied for 5th in 16, T4 in 17, T2 last year in 2018. So every year he comes in with high expectations, and he meets those expectations. Now this year he's got a little bit of added pressure because he's in his home country, but I'm okay with that. I don't mind 11-6, and here's another reason why you can play him. There's a lot of value in that 7K range. You know, a field this large but solid. There's a lot of solid guys down there, even in the low 7K range. In the podcast, I started at 7,600 when we went into the 7K range and then went down from there. Okay, and then we had a few guys in the 6K range. So I think you can put some solid lineups together with Rory. He's been in great form this year. We've seen him win a couple times at the RBC and then at the Players' Championship. You know, he was a top 10 at the U.S. Open. Why not play him? And I just like Rory, so I'm going to play him. I'd love to see him win. And sometimes in majors, I just like playing guys that I'm pulling for. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one more guy I kind of have a beef with about you. Do you have anybody with me?
I don't, but let's get it going. Let's get it going. These things that I got are beeping at me for some reason.
I don't understand why Paul Casey is a fade. You talk about an elite ball striker. You talk about he's a Euro. He's from the UK, so he's from England, which Northern Ireland is basically a home event for Paul Casey. You know what I mean? He's from right there around the pond, mate. You know, and I just feel like his iron play and his love of Portrush is valuable at this event, and I don't understand how you fade him in the 9K range, mate. He's coming off a 5th at the Travelers, a 21st.
You're so doing an Australian accent right now. That's way more Australian than it is.
He won the Valspar, which is as lengthy as it gets in the U.S. Like the Paul Casey fade, the 8K range on DraftKings is an interesting range. And
I think you're.
And I understand
exactly
you can't
right.
play them all. You can't play them all. But why Paul Casey is the fade above the others is a puzzling thing to me as I eat some
I
chips.
just think, for one, I think in a lot of majors, especially when you get a Paul Casey in the 8K range, he tends to be fairly high owned. I'll see if I can pull up. This is going to be so. He was 12% at the U.S. Open. He was 14% at the PGA. But a guy, you get him in that 8K range. I just don't think he's going to get you the value that you need. And then you look at the Open Championship in general. You mentioned on the podcast, and maybe tonight between chips coming down your mouth, that you loved history, especially at Open Championships, and he just doesn't really have that here. I mean, he's not really done anything. At the Open. I mean, let's look at his last 5 years. 51st last year. He did have a T11 in 17, missed cut in 16, T74 in 15, and then a top 50 in 2014. So yeah, he's making cuts, but he's not really doing anything
it's
else.
hot or not time, boys and girls, and not just because it's like a bajillion degrees outside our Boston-based studio. It's going to be 100 here on Saturday. Fun fact. Hello again to our baseball guys, all of them hot. Steve, Matt, and Jonah. Yes, I'm feeling generous this evening.
All right, guys. Jordan Yamamoto has quietly been a bright spot for the Marlins. He's 3-0 with a 1.24 ERA and WHIP under 1. Is he going to be hot or not today against the Padres, Steve?
Yeah, I'll definitely give him a hot for this one. I mean, he's been great since he's been called up, and now he's facing a team that has the highest K percentage in the league against right-handed pitching. I mean, look, he's given up 6 total runs since he's come up, and 4 of them came in one of those starts. I mean, I feel like this kid's just not getting enough love. Maybe it's because he's on the Marlins, which, obviously people don't realize. But, pitching in Marlins Park tonight, I think there's a lot to like in this start here. And I'm still a little unsure about his ownership here because just tonight's pitching slate as a whole is just absolutely atrocious. But I think he's someone definitely to look for and pay up for.
Matt, hot or not?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be on an island here, but I'm going with a not for Mr. Yamamoto. He has been brilliant this season. I'm not denying that fact, but he is not somebody that I have high hopes for in the long term. He was not a highly regarded prospect. He pitched to a 4.19 FIP in AA this season before getting called up to the majors. And this Padres offense can do some damage when they get outside of Petco Park. They are 10th in runs per game on the road this season, 6th in ISO on the road against right-handed pitchers. So I think that this is a little bit more of a dangerous spot than most people think. Going off what Steve said, I would expect his ownership to be, pretty modest here, pretty moderate, like in the around 20% maybe. I would rather look at the other side of this game. I'd rather target the Padres pitcher as opposed to going with Yamamoto here.
Jonah, is Matt on an island?
He could pass a pina colada because I'm joining him.
Let's
Oh, 2 straws.
Wow. 169 batting average on balls in play allowed by Mr. Yamamoto since he came up, which is obviously low and unsustainable. And a 0% home run per fly ball rate, which is, I'm pretty sure, also unsustainable. Now, it doesn't mean regression is going to hit him in the head all at the same time. But if you look at the Padres, Matt cited those stats as being much, much better at Petco Park. And I think you also have to consider the Padres stats as a team offensively, and consider that Fernando Tatis Jr. was only there for 2/3 of their games. He's a beast, man. He's got an OPS almost 1,200 over the last 3 weeks. So anything, if the Padres are ranked X, then rank him X plus a little bit because now they have Tatis at the top of his powers. I think Yamamoto is going to get hit for the first time this season.
All right, from a current Marlin to a former one, JT Realmuto's been one of the hotter catchers as of late. He's hitting .368 over his last 10 games, but he's going up against Walker Buehler this evening. So you thinking that prevents Realmuto from having a flame-worthy performance, Matt? I believe Buehler will be making his first start since July 3rd, following his first All-Star appearance.
Buehler.
Yeah,
no interest here in Realmuto. He's batting 6th. He's expensive at 4,100, and it's one of the toughest matchups in baseball. Buehler has become one of the best pitchers in the league. He's 4th among qualified starters and 5th this season. And that includes getting off to a pretty rough start. He has been absolutely lights out since the beginning of June, -1 start at Coors Field. So I joked about Travis d'Arnaud earlier. I would much rather roster him batting 1st than a guy like Realmuto, who's more expensive, batting 6th in a brutal matchup.
Okay, Jonah, Buehler, I believe, is our 3rd-ranked pitcher on the DraftKings playbook. So is he going to be able to shut down the hotness of Realmuto?
Yeah, I like those odds for Buehler. 251 on base percentage allowed against right-handed hitters this year. That's really, really good. And we talk about catchers who are similarly priced or better. Gary Sanchez is more expensive, but I think Sanchez is going to out-hit him. And we got to pick on our friend Glenn Sparkman, who it seems like every time we do a segment, Glenn Sparkman is the one who's pitching, and he's the one who's going to get lit. James McCann, I'd rather have him for a lower price than Realmuto, too. I could name at least 5, 6, 7 catchers off the top of my head who I'd much rather have than Realmuto based on matchups, price, what have you.
Okay, if you can do it off the top of your head, just give me like 3 or 4 real quick.
Sanchez, McCann, and whoever it is Matt just said.
Okay, perfect. That was 2. That's enough. Steven, Mr. JT, do you think he continues his success?
So look, his best hitting of the season has come at home against right-handed pitching. He's got a 374 WOBA, 226 isolated power, 6 of his 11 home runs, but on a slate where pitching is basically atrocious from top to bottom, this is not a matchup you have to go out of your way to target against. I mean, there are so many more enticing matchups that I would want to target against. That going against Walker Buehler just doesn't make any sense to me here. Maybe Realmuto gets a couple hits here or whatnot, but for the price that he's at, and it just doesn't make sense to me here. So I'm not going near him today, or really the Phillies at all. There's so many opportunities on this slate that you can target instead.
All right, well, Josh Bell hasn't had a double-digit fantasy performance in 6 straight games.
That's not good.
So do you like his chances to break out of this mini slump against the Cardinals, Jonah?
I do, because Jack Flaherty's pitching, and Jack Flaherty's overrated. He's not very good, especially against left-handed hitters. Bell, obviously, switch hitter, 491 slugging against lefties. And you look at his last 6 starts, Flaherty, he's allowed 4 runs or more in 4 of those last 6. Bell's better against, he's awesome both ways, but he's particularly good from the left side. I think this is the one where he breaks out. He'll get the double digits.
Steve, is he going to break out of his slump?
I mean, Jack Flaherty was somebody I was really high on before the season began, and I'm like avoiding him like the plague now. He's just been absolutely atrocious, and especially against left-handed pitching too as well, and at Busch Stadium. You know, Josh Bell's been one of the better hitters in the league, especially against righties. I mean, there's just a lot to like about Bell in this spot here. And, you know, like I said, Flaherty has just been so poor against lefties that it's just hard to like him in this matchup. I think actually, if anything, the Pirates lefty stack is actually a really sneaky play here tonight. But yeah, there's just not really anything to like about Flaherty in this game. So I like Bell in this spot a lot.
Matt, seems like Josh Bell is in a smash spot tonight.
Yeah, I'm with these guys. I like Bell. And just to add to what they've said, even though he hasn't really produced, Bell has still hit the ball well over the past 15 days. 241-foot distance, 96-mile-an-hour exit velocity, 60% hard hit rate. If he keeps making that kind of contact, the fantasy results are going to come.
Matt, Albert Pujols has not one but 2 20-plus point performances in 3 games since the break, but sandwiched between there is a big old fat 0. Will he be hot or not tonight against Houston?
Oh, man, I can't do it. I'm not even 100% convinced he's going to be in the lineup tonight if Trout is back. But even if he is, as Steve has said many times on this show, you don't play Pujols against right-handed pitchers. You look at his WOBA over the past 12 months, 285 against right-handers, which is just not good. Seems like a perfect time to sell high on him.
Okay, Jonah, what do you think? It's a no-go for you?
No, I'll take a flyer. Why not? You got Rondon starting, but then you've got Rogelio Armenteros going up for Houston. That's only his 3rd major league appearance. He's vulnerable. He's his 3rd major league appearance, so I could see it. Armenteros is not one of their top prospects by any means. Obviously, if he gets hit, the Astros can go to someone else, but now you're into the underbelly of the bullpen, not necessarily their best guys. So I think the Angels could be a good move here in general, and Pujols has been hot, so I'll take a shot at it.
All right, Steve, Matt was just putting words in your mouth saying you want nothing to do with Albert Pujols against a righty. Is he correct?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he takes the knowledge that I bring on a daily show and then, uses it for his own. So, obviously that's what I'm going to go to because that's the right answer. I mean, the Astros game they're running a bullpen here tonight. So, you're not getting like solidified matchups here from inning to inning. So it's not worth it. I mean, like I said, there's so many other opportunities that you want to take advantage of here tonight. Going to Pujols in a right-on-right matchup just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. His isolated power against lefties is so much more enticing. When he's facing a lefty, yeah, absolutely go for it. He's got like over 200 isolated power against him on the year. In these righty matchups, whatever. He hit a couple dingers now and then. Good for him. I'm not going for it today.
All right, good stuff, guys. We're going to talk to you guys again. Giants and Rockies showdown picks coming up later. But after this, our football guy is going to join the panel once again.
What's going on? It's Brendan Glasheen, and with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. With Wilson Contreras heading to IL, the Cubs have a major hole behind the dish. Contreras on pace for a career season. Starting catcher for the National League All-Star team is averaging 8.7 DraftKings points per game. It's a big loss for Chicago and your DFS lineups. The Cubbies have found a man to fill in. Martin Maldonado, acquired from the Royals Tuesday. The 32-year-old and former Gold Glover Maldonado is hitting just .224 with 6 home runs and 17 RBI over 73 games this season. So clearly he's a big drop-off from Contreras. Have to wonder if the injury is more serious than initially thought. The Cubs medical staff determined Contreras playing through the right foot muscle strain, that's his injury, would only make it worse. He's definitely out the next 10 days. Cubs will miss his offensive production, and don't forget Contreras has an impact defensively. How will the starting pitchers adjust to Maldonado calling pitches? Cubs boast the 8th best starters ERA in baseball.
All right, the good news is NFL training camps open up like next week. The better news is that means real-life football soon follows, and the better news is fantasy football is almost here.
Yeah, so let our team previews continue. Looking at the Redskins right now with the help of Steve Buchanan, Jeff Ulrich, and Matt LaMarca. DK Live's panel, consisting of writers and analysts, we can confirm, is predicting Darius Geis will be their fantasy MVP this season. Do you agree with that pick, Steve? No, we can't hear you.
We need to hear your words.
We definitely need to hear
How do I say?
Okay.
Yeah, you're beautiful.
Never mind.
Go to Jeff.
Okay,
Go to
Jeff.
Jeff. Go to
You're
Jeff.
first.
Jeff, come on. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Darius Geis is I think is in a horrible spot. I'm not sure. Maybe this pick was done before we got the news that his most recent injury, but this is a player coming off multiple knee surgeries, and now he's dealing with hamstring injuries. This before training camp has even started, as well as having to like rehab that reconstructed knee, which he's already had multiple surgeries on. This is horrible. Oh, also, Adrian Peterson is still there. Adrian Peterson hates coming off. He's going to throw a tantrum every time he does. Adrian Peterson averaged 4.2 yards per carry and 1,000 yards last year. So I don't see the upside with Darius Geis. It could end up by the end of the season. This could happen. My pick for a team MVP for Washington, it would probably be Dwayne Haskins. I mean, I think he's going to have to come in and do it all. So I don't see Geis as having the upside here.
Yeah, Matt, does that injury just throw you off this guy?
Yeah, he's a hard fade for me right now at his current price. I mean, I don't get to talk a lot of NFL on this show, so I'm coming in here throwing just fireballs today.
Let's go.
Oh, great.
Coming off an ACL tear, dealing with an ACL with a hamstring injury, competing with Adrian Peterson for early down work, and then Chris Thompson is one of the better third down backs in the league. Not to mention Washington is going to be awful offensively this year. So, like, the upside is he's a two-down hammer for one of the worst offenses in the league. And the downside is he's going to be Adrian Peterson's backup. Like, I wouldn't draft him in a single-digit round. He would have to get in past the 10th round for me to consider him in a draft right now.
Steve, on Twitter, Geis said not to worry about the hamstring.
Oh, cool. I can say a lot of things on Twitter, too. It doesn't mean anything. Like, I posted this gross ice cream that came into my house.
Dude.
But, whatever.
Mochi,
How
yeah.
gross is that ice cream?
It's not
Anyways,
good.
there's just so many questions here, and there's so many things you have to consider. I mean, these guys have been hammering, the other running backs on the team, too. Let's not forget, they drafted a running back high in the fourth round, too, with Bryce Love. I mean, who knows what he's going to bring to this team as well? I mean, who knows how Adrian Peterson's going to hold up? Who knows how Thompson's going to hang up? Go with here. So Love could end up having some legitimate downs in this. So I don't know how you go with Geis at all. I mean, honestly, the MVP of this team is probably going to be like a defensive player. Like, that's what's going to end up being. How exciting. That's where we are with the Redskins here. So this is such a hard fade. It's not even fun.
Jeff, let's start with you here. The panel predicting Case Keenum will be the LVP, meaning a player who will be overvalued. So you think this is actually going to be the case? I know you just mentioned Dwayne Haskins. You think is going to be the MVP, which means you probably don't expect Keenum to play very much.
I mean, if the Redskins start Case Keenum, I don't even know. Like, what is Case Keenum going to bring to this team? I don't know. Maybe he does end up starting. But, yeah, I don't think he's going to start for very long if it happens, because we saw what happened to Case. He had the one magical season with the Minnesota Vikings. And then we saw last year the real Case Keenum in Denver when he actually had to do a few things and carry a team. It's not going to happen. There's no chance. Washington's worse than the Broncos are last year, and Case Keenum's not going to carry it. So even if he does start like the first 4 or 5 games, it's going to be the Haskins show. I guess you can label him as the LVP here, because I don't really know who else on this team you could label as the least valuable player. Maybe like Paul Richardson, who people might be expecting to bounce back, but he'll get injured after 5 games. This team is just littered with horrible fantasy plays, really. So it could be anyone, but Case Keenum is as good a candidate as anyone.
Yeah, Matt, who are you labeling the LVP for this team? Because I don't know if many people are even going to put much value in Keenum to begin with, considering Haskins just breathing down his neck.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was going to make. Nobody wants Keenum on their team, but that's being reflected in his ADP. He's going right now as QB 36. He's being drafted outside the top 200 in most drafts. Like, that's not a guy who can be a disappointment because he has no expectations to begin with. I do think he will start the first few games of the season. That's just kind of what we see from these teams. Even like a guy like Deshaun Watson, who was awesome. If Tom Savage wasn't a bum, he probably would have started, the first few games of that season. it only took him 1/2 to get himself benched. I could see a similar scenario here for Keenum. If you are in a 2-quarterback league, if you're desperate for somebody who maybe you can start the first couple of weeks of the season, I think Keenum can be fine for you there. But that's really like the only expectation I think that people have for him right now.
All right, Steve, Jeff just mentioned it. I mean, Keenum's time with the Broncos was an absolute failure, scoring more than 20 fantasy points just 3 times in 15 games last season. Really? Who is even valuing this guy at all?
Nobody. And that's why he's, been nominated the LVP here. The only thing that, I think these guys might be missing here is that I think we all know the Redskins are going to be bad. Why do they need to rush Haskins into a starting role? Like, I could see Keenum starting with the majority of these games because really, why rush Haskins in for something that really is going to mean nothing? So if that means that Keenum is going to be starting more games, then yeah, let's give him the LVP because he does nothing with his legs. So if we're relying on him in the passing game, good luck with that. Look at that receiving core that's surrounding him. What's it, Dotson, Richardson? Oh boy, here comes 50 yards a game. I mean, it's just absolutely atrocious. So if you're relying on Keenum to kind of run this offense, I mean, yeah, it's just going to be a nightmare in Washington. But, like I said, I don't see Haskins rushing into a starter's role. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Jeff, you're still feeling like Haskins should start right away, even as the point Steve just made? I mean, the lack of talent in that receiving core?
I think so. I think one thing to consider is that Jay Gruden is basically this is the year for him. So he might just throw Haskins in there just to see a little pop or something to try and get to 7 wins and save his job, because really that's the only chance they have of getting to 7 or 8 wins is if Haskins comes in and just chucks it around and gets the offense going a bit. So I think Haskins is interesting for fantasy purposes. I think the one player that a lot of people probably aren't going to hear much about, but might actually pop a little bit here is Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver they drafted from Ohio State, who worked with Haskins and is like a 4.35 guy. I think considering the wide receiver depth on the Washington Redskins right now, McLaurin could come in and just catch like 60 passes and like 7 touchdowns or something and be some kind of fantasy factor here. So Terry McLaurin is definitely a name to keep an eye on. And obviously Haskins, I think he will win the job in training camp. I think he's good enough to do it. So we'll see what happens there, though.
Okay, so Jeff, does that beg the question then? Do you think Haskins will be the breakout player for the Redskins? Like, would you target him as your guy, or do you think there's going to be somebody else?
I mean, that's why I brought up McLaurin, because I think McLaurin could actually end up being the breakout player. But if Haskins starts from week 1, it's going to be Haskins, just because I think he's a good enough pocket passer, and there's just going to be enough opportunities being down so much that I think he's probably going to rack up top 20, top 15 numbers.
Steve, could it be Haskins even if he doesn't have the starting job right from the start?
I mean, look, he has one of the best potentials. There's no doubt about that. But, I brought up Bryce Love earlier, and I think there's a scenario where, especially in the second half of the year, that he could see some serious reps. I mean, look, who knows what Adrian Peterson, if he's going to hold up the whole entire year. Geis, God only knows if he can make it on the field. Then you look at Chris Thompson, too. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this season. So if he's having a decent year, I mean, who knows if he's even on the team. They could easily ship him off for something to try to get something back and start rebuilding this team here. So if all those scenarios kind of play out, I mean, Love could end up being in a role where he's seeing a decent amount of work near the end of the year. So I think he's someone to kind of keep an eye on, especially when you're doing your drafts. I mean, obviously not anything high here, but there's just so much questions in that backfield that if Love is given the opportunity, we saw how well he played in college, I think he could do some damage on this team.
Matt, what's your take? Could it be Haskins?
There's one player on the Redskins that I am eyeing this year that I think is going to be fantasy relevant, and that's Trey Quinn. He's coming off the board barely inside the top 80 wide receivers, but if you look at his college production, he went to SMU. He was playing next to Cortland Sutton and was actually better than Cortland Sutton in their senior year, or his senior year. He's locked down the slot role in the offense, according to Jay Gruden. And if we think Keenum's going to start, at least early in the year, if you look at the type of passes that Keenum likes to throw, they're all checkdowns. 3.7 air yards per attempt last year. That was the 24th lowest mark amongst quarterbacks. So he likes to throw the ball close to the line of scrimmage. That's where Trey Quinn figures to do the majority of his damage. I think that he is a sneaky bet to lead the team in targets this year, and he's basically free right now. So I love the idea of scooping him as a wide receiver late in your drafts.
All right, football friends, farewell. Well, actually, that's just Jeff because we need Steve and Matt coming up for MLB Showdown picks next, right after one more go-around with the Tour Junkies.
All right, you want to talk some betting odds?
Yeah. Shall
we?
These things aren't beeping at me right now, but they probably will soon.
All right. Well, we'll get started then. On the betting odds in terms of DraftKings, I think there's some guys who, are a little longer on DK than I find them elsewhere. I think when you look historically in Open Championship winners, you definitely see plenty of middle-priced kind of guys come up and win this championship. It's hard for a triple-digit winner to make it happen, but I do have a couple for you that I'll give you. But I'm going to start with the shorter odds. I got to give a guy who I've been riding all year long, Hideki Matsuyama. Hideki is at 40-1 on the betting odds there on DraftKings. He's got a couple top 20s here in recent history at the Open Championship, but the form is amazing. Like, his iron play is amazing. He's gaining strokes off the tee, hitting accurately. I got some chip dust in my mouth. All right, I'm going Hideki. And then at 48-1.
48, that's an interesting number.
It is an interesting number. Matt Kuchar, who, Kuch has got an incredible record here. He's gained, 26 strokes off at the Open Championship in the last 5 years. Needless to say, Kuch enjoys him the Open Championship. He's in good form. He's an accurate player. He's not going to get in a lot of trouble off the tee. I think 48-1 is a number where if you're shopping numbers, you're likely to find the best number here on DraftKings.
I hope the odds makers for DraftKings Sportsbook don't listen to this before our listeners do.
Yeah, it may change.
Because
it may change.
I've seen that at 40 and 35-1 in some spots, so that's pretty good.
I'm going with another guy who I've seen at shorter odds, and that is Ian Poulter at 70-1. I like Poltz. I mean, he doesn't have the greatest recent record at Open Championships, but he's got a really solid links history, both in the long term and the short term. 41st a couple weeks ago at the Irish, 14th just this past week at the Scottish Open. Really good scrambler, so if he gets in trouble and misses greens, he can get up and down with the best of them on tour, on any tour, is Ian Poulter. So I like him at 70-1. And then I've got two long shots, both at 175-1. This first one is just a pure, he's a former Open Championship winner, Zach Johnson. I'm not playing him in DFS. I'm not betting him anywhere but on DraftKings if you're able. At 175-1, a previous Open Championship winner who's accurate off the tee, who doesn't get in a lot of trouble. He hasn't had the best year, but 175-1 is a massive number. Finally, a guy that I feel a little better about is Andy Sullivan at 175-1, who finished 28th just last week at the Scottish Open and finished runner-up at the Irish Open 2 weeks ago at Lahinch Golf Club, which is very similar to the golf course we're going to see here at Royal Portrush. And actually, Andy Sullivan does not have a bad Open Championship record. It's actually pretty solid. 175-1. For him to win, it's definitely a long shot. It's 175-1, but Andy Sullivan's a solid player.
Last block of the show, let's get it.
We're so hungry.
Yes, we are very hungry. We've got Giants and Rockies showdown picks to get to, and here to give us theirs is Steve, Matt, and Jonah. One final time tonight, so please soak it up, children.
All right, Brandon Crawford went bonkers in yesterday's day game. A 51-point performance. He's only 5,200 today. Is he a must-play, Matt?
I don't like the word must play, but I do think that he's a very good play. 5,200 is cheap. He's on the positive side of his batting splits against Lambert, who is just awful. I mentioned some of his numbers earlier in the show, but he can't get anybody out at Coors Field. Crawford, not a great hitter. 274 WOBA against right-handers over the past 12 months, but he is batting fifth in the lineup tonight. At 5,200, I think you could do a lot worse. I think he's a nice value.
Steve, I don't mean to trigger you, but with these next words, is he a must play?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Matt said, must is a strong word, but, his ownership is going to be sky high because of what he did last night. Recency bias People are going to remember that huge game he had last night. And we have to remember that's just not the type of player he is. I mean, that was as rare gets when it comes to Brandon Crawford. But in the same respect, Lambert has just been so poor against lefties, especially at Coors Field. 5 of his 9 home runs have come against lefties at Coors Field. So getting him at 5,200 is an extremely good value, especially in a game that has such a high run total. We don't know if it's going to get the 14.5 runs, but I just think you have to take a shot with him here, especially to pay up for some of these other higher price bats you'll be looking at.
Jonah, is he a must play? I know that's
don't
strong
say that.
language.
Don't say
strong
that.
language.
Strong language. I like Crawford, but how about Buster Posey? I mean, if we're going to pick a Giant, I like Posey in this matchup. He's batting second. He's hitting .333 over the last 3 weeks. This is the Posey that we know historically. He has been really kind of rough in the last season and a half for most of it, but really starting to turn it on. That huge game-winning grand slam against the Brewers recently. We saw him go yard against the Rockies in this series. He's going to get maybe one more time at bat, potentially, than Crawford will, batting second versus fifth. I like Crawford, but I think I like Posey just a little bit more in this match.
Steve, the Rockies offense, yes, it was ice cold in its doubleheader yesterday. We talked about that, but they still have the top 4 players in this contest in terms of price. Charlie Blackmon leading the way, followed by Trevor Story, Double D, David Dahl, and Nolan Arenado. Which one is worth the high price?
I'll go the cheaper out here. I'll take Arenado here. I mean, we all know how well he does against lefties at Coors Field. 480 WOBA, 306 isolated power on this season. I mean, those are just some incredible numbers here. So I'll definitely take that spot here for Arenado. Save a little bit of salary for some of the other guys here as well. But I think he's in one of the best spots in this game.
Jonah, you like that move, kind of going with Arenado to try to save a little bit of cash?
Very much so, and I think that I would take him honestly, even if he was the most high, even if he was the highest price of those 4. You look at those home splits; they're huge. You look at the versus lefties; they're huge. That's a left-handed pitcher here. Somebody like Blackmon, who statistically has been the best Rocky this season, he doesn't get the platoon advantage. So Arenado, the fact that he's a little bit cheaper is great because I would take him if he was the most expensive of the bunch.
Matt, you still have Blackmon, Story, and Dahl to choose from here if you feel like being a little different and standing out.
Yeah, I mean, the real answer is play as many of them as you can.
Okay,
but
that's cool.
My favorite is actually Charlie Blackmon. If you look at what he's done historically, he actually averages more fantasy points at home against left-handers than against right-handers. So the platoon split doesn't really matter all that much to me. And another thing is that his ownership, at least in the classic format, is usually half of what it is when he's facing a left-hander versus facing a right-hander. So I'm expecting him to fly a little bit under the radar compared to guys like Story and Arenado who do have the splits advantage. I mean, all these guys are going to command big ownership, but I do think that Blackmon will check in below those 2 guys, which makes him, my preferred play in this tier.
All right, who would you put in your captain spot, Jonah? Remember, 1.5 times the salary, but 1.5 times the points.
I'd love to be super creative, but it's going to be Nolan Arenado for all the reasons that we mentioned. He's a terrific hitter, smokes lefties, does great at home, properly priced. So even at the 1.5, you're still getting a little bit of a discount compared to 1.5 times other guys. He's my guy.
Matt, your captain, please.
This one's pretty easy for me. Nolan Arenado might be properly priced, but I think that Brandon Belt is pretty significantly underpriced. So I will pay up for him at captain. If you look at what he's done historically, he has been a really good hitter when facing a right-handed pitcher on the road. His numbers overall don't jump out at you, but that's because he plays roughly half his games in one of the most pitcher-friendly ballparks in baseball. When he gets on the road and is on the positive side of his batting splits, he can do some damage, and there's no better park to do some damage than in Coors Field. So I like the idea of paying up for Belt as my captain, and then that allows me to load up my lineup with all those other big guys.
Steve, your captain, please.
I actually like this spot for Brandon Crawford. We talk about all these bats that we want to play, but it's going to be pretty tough if you're paying up for one of those premium guys in the captain spot. And look, obviously, we like we mentioned it, Lambert has troubles against lefties. Crawford has some power in those matchups. So I have no problem using him here, save some salary, and then you can really jam in 3 of those the Rockies bats if you want to here. So I think it's actually a pretty good strategy, and I that's what I would be looking towards.
Guys, most importantly right now, when slate approved time. So who is your lock on this entire 15-game slate? People need to know this because lineups lock here in about 5 minutes. Let's start with you, Jonah.
Nolan Arenado once again. I'd love to
Wow,
be creative, but
dude.
he's really good. We're going triple crown Nolan Arenado here.
Do you have an Arenado poster in your office?
Yes.
No, Jason Tyner bobblehead, yes. Nolan Arenado poster, no.
Okay, Maddie, slate approved.
Brandon Belt, all formats.
Steven, let's wrap up the show with you, young man.
Yeah, it's going to be Juan Soto. The Orioles bullpen are actually the worst in the league against left-handed bats. Once that bullpen gets in there, it's a big show for Juan Soto here tonight.
Cool, man.
Excellent work, you guys. We appreciate the time. As always, this has been The Sweat. I'm Jessie. He's Emerson. We will be back together here tomorrow at this desk at 6 p.m. Lots more DFS and betting news. So see you then.